Aaron Kruse. He's the chair of Democrats Abroad China and co-chair of the 2020 Platform Committee. He's going to present us a green new platform. Happy Earth Day, Aaron.
Happy Earth Day. Thank you for the introduction, Angela, and thank you for the opportunity to share a little bit more about the platform and specifically how we're engaging on the topic of the Earth, environment, energy, climate, those sorts of things. Hi, Katie. I see you in the comments. So I'm going to turn on a PowerPoint that I've prepared. It's not really complicated. It's pretty simple and straightforward, but I think it will help people follow along with some of the processes that we've gone through for this year's this year's platform.
Okay, great. We're all looking forward to it.
Cool. So I'm just going to work from the assumption that you can see my screen and that you'll tell me if you can't. So thank you everybody who's online. This is a really, really exciting event. And I'm here today as the co-chair of the platform committee. There are 4 of us that are currently chairs or vice chairs on the platform committee, and then a lot more volunteers. So I'll get to that in just a second. But I wanted to tell you all about what we're doing with the platform and what Democrats Abroad is going to do in terms of our advocacy and our energy about climate and about the environment. So to introduce where the platform is coming from this year, we've got a little bit of a different vision than where it has been in the past. Specifically, what we're trying to do is craft language that describes a destination rather than provide turn-by-turn navigation for how to get to a specific point with our country. And so when we have this draft coming out really soon, and you're going to notice that the way we've written it is less a list of things that we need to do and more kind of a description of problems that we need to solve and how we're going to solve them. And so this is really about shaping the future of our party, both in terms of the way that Democrats Abroad or DPCA communicates to our members and internally, but very, very importantly, this is also about how Democrats Abroad communicates to other state parties, and it's about how Democrats Abroad communicates to the DNC about our priorities. And I think DA has a very unique perspective on the challenges that confront the world because we are all dispersed throughout the world, and we live in countries that are some more than others succeeding or failing in the fight against climate change. And I think that we have a responsibility as members of DA with that perspective, to share that perspective with people who don't have the same opportunities. And I think if we've learned anything over the last couple of years, this is a very important message for us to share with the DNC and other state parties within the Democratic Party. So who is the platform committee? Who are the people that are doing this stuff right now? Well, I'm there in the top left. I'm the co-chair along with Farid Benamor, who's from DA Switzerland. And then our co-vice chairs are Winman Linroth, who's in DA UK, and Sally Swartz, who's in DA France. And so the 4 of us are essentially a team that's responsible for helping to draft a document that the members of DA can provide their feedback on. So it's not considered the final version. We're not kind of the drafters by ourselves. We're responsible for listening, for gathering the feedback, and for hearing what people want to be in the platform, and then managing the process of edits and producing this into something that we can use. And so I want to share now a little bit about the energy that has gone into this so far, because some people might not know this, but we've been working on this since September of 2019. So there's been a lot of work that's gone into this so far. And we've learned a bunch of things along the way. And one that I was really just floored by, one piece of information I was floored by, is that this is the #1 issue. The issue of the environment and climate is the #1 issue for our members. This isn't just elected leaders from different CCs or from caucuses. This is the people who live all around the world that are our members of Democrats Abroad. And the way that we know this is the #1 issue is we had a poll that we sent to all members where people could choose any part of the platform, any plank they wanted to write about, and they'd give us feedback and say, here's all the things I think, this should be in there, this shouldn't be in there, we need to do this. And out of all of the planks, the #1 issue, the #1 plank that got people to engage and tell us what needs to be done, tell us that it's important for the future of the United States, the Democratic Party, was climate and environment and energy. And so this is really important. The reason I'm on this call today and part of this event is because we want to make sure that the platform fully encompasses what we need to have in there to be have a platform that's representative of everybody. And we had over 1,100 responses from our membership, and the average time that an individual spent on that was about 33 minutes. So you can think about this as well over 30,000 minutes of interviews and conversations with people who have shared incredible feedback with us and have told us this is such an important issue. We've had more than 50 people involved in the drafting of the entire platform. And I think one thing that we need to keep in mind about all of this is that this platform document needs to live for 4 years for us. So it isn't something that we can just say, oh, we need to address this year, or we should endorse this piece of legislation that's in the current cycle, but rather this needs to be a vision that lasts for the next 4 years. And these next 4 years are going to be absolutely essential to the survival of our Earth. We'd like to have a lot more Earth days. And these next 4 years are really important because there are no second chances for getting the climate right, for getting the environment right. There's no planet B. I like that saying a lot. So the platform, I hope, will reflect this amount of energy, this incredible input, and the importance of this issue when we have a final document to vote on at the Global Convention. So just a bit more detail. I won't go through all of these in a ton of detail, but I wanted to share a little bit about what has been going on to get to where we are going to be by the end of this week with the first public draft of the platform document. So I want to just highlight two specific things. The first thing I want to highlight is the kitchen table talks feedback that we got. This was a new initiative to get people to meet at a kitchen table or any table and share with us their thoughts on a variety of issues. And we got some really great feedback out of that, but we felt that we wanted to reach members more directly. So we sent out this poll in January. And then with the feedback from the poll and the kitchen table talks and the resolutions that have passed in previous years at DPCA meetings, including the Green New Deal resolution, we have drafted a document that we think captures the feedback that we've got so far. So I'm going to go to how you can be part of this. And I want to draw your attention to the title of this slide, which is A Noisy Spring, much preferable to a silent spring, because I need everybody who's on this call, all of your members, if you're a leader, I need people to participate. The platform committee wants us to be very, very open, a very democratic process. And so I want to spend an entire 5 minutes telling you what you can do to be a part of making sure our platform document reflects our shared vision for the US and the globe. So we're going to have a public draft. That's in the first box there. From the public draft, there's two ways to share feedback. The first is going to be a global call, like a WebEx or a Zoom call, with all of the leaders from all of the regions, all of our DPCA voting reps, essentially. The second will be a feedback form that will go out to all of our members. So if you're a comms leader somewhere, or you've got a bunch of friends that are members of Democrats Abroad, or you run a Facebook page, there will be an opportunity for you to share a link to the platform, and then people share their feedback, what they love, what they don't love, personal comments if they want to, but there's a way for all members to share their feedback with us. The next step is going to be our regional conventions. Those are happening in about 3 weeks. At the regional conventions, there's again two things that you can do. The first thing you can do is share, is inform your members in each country committee that each region will have 2 elected representatives to the final platform committee that will represent us at the global convention. So the current platform committee is appointed, it's just 4 people. The final platform committee will be 13 people. 6 of them will be elected from the regions, from the regional conventions. So that will be 2 from each region. So be really, really mindful of running for a position as a platform committee member from your regional convention. If you're not interested in being a part of drafting this document with a huge team, then be mindful of who you support. Know what issues they care about, know what history they have with the platform, know if they've been involved yet, or if this is the first they're hearing about the platform, but demand that people who represent you on the platform committee have an understanding and the energy to advocate on important issues. The other thing you can do is you can share with your members that you're going to be voting or participating in the regional convention so that they can come and see what the platform document is all about. They can come and see what our regional meetings look like and use this to drive some involvement, to drive new leaders, to get some grassroots engagement on important issues. And the last thing is when we go to the global convention. Obviously, we'd love it if we passed a platform document, if you're a voting member of DPCA. But very, very importantly, is that this document lasts for 4 years. This isn't like we pass it and then we forget about it until 4 years later. This is supposed to help us drive advocacy. This is supposed to help us drive events and engagement. And so help us take the platform and really live it. It's supposed to be a living document that represents where Democrats abroad are on the issues. And we should use it as a rallying cry, as a way to get people involved on the various parts of our platform that they care about. So that's all I've really got for presenting about the platform. I do want to share a few minutes to entertain some questions from Angela and Anne, Katie, if you're there as well. But for everybody that's watching live on Facebook or elsewhere, we have an email address that's set up for this. It is platform@democratsabroad.com. Sorry, .org. No, .com, it's right. And so please send us an email if you've got feedback. So yeah, Katie, I can explain the regional and global conventions really quickly. I kind of went over those quickly. So the regional conventions, there's going to be 3 of them, one for the Americas, one for Europe, and one for Asia Pacific. And those are in about 3 weeks' time. It's May 16, 17, I believe. And at the regional conventions, we do a lot of business as official party business as Democrats abroad. And one of the things that we're doing is electing representatives for various functions that go to the global convention. One that I'm really concerned about, one that I'm paying a lot of attention to, is the representatives for the platform committee. The platform committee will be responsible from May 16, 17 until 3 weeks later when we have the global convention for taking all of the feedback that we get on the first draft and then turning it into something that can be voted on and deliberated at the global convention. Katie, go ahead.
Aaron, this is so amazing. What a well thought out process.
Well, thank you.
I would just, for context, because I don't know who's on this call, and I hope there's a bunch of people on the call that barely know what we're about. And if that is true, or even if they know a lot of what we're about, I just wanted to step back a little and remind people that the global presidential primary, which took place in March and February with in-person voting and remote voting, the results of that primary, sorry, I'm going off in a different direction, but we have 13 delegates from Democrats abroad that will go to the Democratic National Convention. And those 13 pledged delegates, who they will be or who they represent was decided at the global primary. The results of the primary allocated 9 of those delegates to Bernie Sanders and 4 of them to Joe Biden. And a main business of the regional conventions and the global convention will be to select the individuals who will be those delegates. So that is going to take up a whole bunch of the energy and time, especially at the regional level. And that's going to pull people together. But, the second and also, as you say, really critical thing that's going to take up and get people very jazzed, especially at the global convention, will be the discussion around and the vote on the platform. And I just love that you have this thing thought out in these various stages, that there's going to be a real chance for feedback before we get there, because it's always a lot of time pressure at those meetings, because the election part always takes more time than you want it to or think it's going to, and the platform gets kind of squished. So the fact that you're going to be releasing beforehand and giving different avenues for feedback before we get to either of those meetings is really, really very thoughtful, and it's going to be very inclusive. Thank you.
Yeah, I think, one of the priorities when we went into this was it's really easy to go in a smoke-filled room, to use a metaphor, and just draft a platform. That's a way to get it done quickly, but not necessarily with a high quality product that people feel like they have a document that represents them, and something that they can really say, hey, my voice was a part of this. This is something that I think speaks for where I'm at in terms of why I support the Democratic Party. So we put a lot of effort and energy into planning ways that people can be sure that this represents them. I see that there was a question in the chat about the address. And so Angela, thank you for pasting the address in there.
That's okay. We're .org. We're not
.coms. Yeah.
No problem. I have a question. Well, it's more, I want you to talk about something.
A softball, thank you.
Yes, our platform is kind of a driver for the DNC platform along with the other state platforms. So we're trying to make our platform as progressive as possible. Is that correct?
Yeah, I would say that Democrats Abroad tends to be one of the more progressive parties within the state parties of Democrats. And I think that it's really, really good too, because we tend to be ahead of other people. One second, my dogs are arguing. 1 second.
Okay. It's good that everyone's at home and we've got dogs, we've got children. It's great that we're
sometimes it's hard to know
families.
The difference
yeah,
between the
true.
dogs and the children.
That's true.
So I think one of the things that's been very important to me, and one of the reasons I put my hand up for this part of Democrats Abroad work, is that we are really leaders, I think, when it comes to the way that other state parties fashion their platforms, fashion the way that they do things. I mean, we've got voting remotely nailed in an era of social distancing. We've been socially distant from voting centers since our existence. Like the Democrats Abroad is really on the cutting edge of a variety of ways of incorporating technology, of incorporating the voices of people, of making our organization really grassroots, because that's where we were born. Democrats Abroad isn't something that's been like started by one or two people for its entire existence. We have the ability to reach people on Facebook with live conferences. We have so many new voting representatives that are part of our organization. My vision, my feeling at least, is that this is a way of taking our global voices of Democrats, very progressive, very green and blue voices, and telling other states and state party leaders that this is where Democrats are if you listen. And so from my point of view, keeping this process one where people have a large share of voice in the way that it gets drafted, have every opportunity for months in advance before there's a vote to share where they're at on these issues, is a way for us to arm ourselves and go to other state parties at the DNC convention and just say, hey, you need to listen to us because we know how people feel about this, we know what needs to be done, and we need you to move on these issues. So this is another reason why I really hope that people pay close attention to what happens at their regional conventions. They really take some time to go through the platform, because we don't just have environment issues in the environment plank. We've woven it into where we're at with the economy plank. We've woven it into where we're at with gender equality, because there are a variety of groups that are much more negatively impacted by climate change than just people living in Iowa like me. So there's a lot of ways that this platform weaves together a bunch of issues that are important for the Democratic Party to talk about and important for the Democratic Party to move on.
Yes, and Adrienne Johnson from the UK, she had a great comment. Our members are from all over the US. So we have a variety of perspectives. We don't simply have a single state focus. We have people from all over the world, all over the United States, looking at our platform and helping to make it better. As the chair of the Black Caucus, our steering committee worked really hard on the criminal justice platform to make it to make it the best that it can be. It's because criminal justice is a big issue in America, with the most prisoners in the world in America. Our criminal justice system is going haywire, and
That's a nice way of saying it.
Yes, I know, but this, I don't want to swear. So, because I could about it, it's really terrible. But yes, we're working very hard on the platform, and we definitely need everyone's help. There were a couple of comments on the website. I'm sorry, on Facebook. Let me just look at the Facebook comments really quick, see if there's anything. I told people to write their comments and questions on Facebook too, just so that we could get them.
Awesome. So I'm in China, so I can't see Facebook. Sorry.
Oh, wow. I don't know if that's a terrible thing or a good
It's
thing.
fantastic for my mental health, I'll tell you that.
For sure. For sure. There's a lot of crazy stuff on Facebook. Sarah Jane Kidd Leone, she says, I agree that aside from representation, an inclusive process will surely create a better document. And Marissa Schinker says, important point, if they listen, how to ensure they are listening and hear the message. I guess she means the DNC, yeah.
Well, if you mean the DNC, the important way to do that is, again, at your regional conventions, we're electing DNC representatives. I would strongly encourage people, especially if you are leaders within Democrats Abroad, when you're casting votes for your DNC representatives, pay attention to not just how much they're involved, how often they're on Facebook sharing links or something like that, but pay attention to what they're doing within the organization to advance us, and make that a part of your decision-making process, because what we need are voices that will carry our message. We, as part of the platform committee, are responsible for crafting what that message is, alongside the executive committee and a bunch of other leaders. But we need people to carry that message. We need people to broadcast that message. So vote for people that you think are going to be good at broadcasting a message. Vote for people that you think are going to be really amplifying where our members are at on these issues. And I'm hopeful that the platform document will do a good job of representing where our members are at, but it by itself doesn't do the work.
Yes.
Aaron, I have a question, if I may. In the context of platform, when we hear we're going to go out and try and collect votes from everywhere, and when you hear people say, oh, those big parties are all alike, oh, the Democrats, the Republicans, the red and blue, they're all alike. In the context of our platform, what can you say to people who think we're the same, or we're all very similar?
I'm also the chair of DA China, and there's a lot of people that share that point of view that are kind of parallel to where our members are really active. And one of the messages that I always try to carry to them, other than just, you can look at our history, you can look at what Democrats Abroad does in terms of enabling access to votes. That's not something the Republican Party actively does. In fact, they go the other direction on these things. Is actions speak louder than words. And if you pay attention to the actions of Democrats Abroad, I can guarantee you that the Republicans are not going through this much effort to ensure that their members have a voice in the way that their platform is drafted. I can guarantee it. Because honestly, if the members of the Republican Party had to share a voice, it'd look a lot more like what the Democratic Party is trying to do, because we're trying to help all people in the United States. I don't have a fantastic retort to all of those kinds of doubters, but my personal opinion on this is I've seen what volunteers like you, Ann, and Angela go through in order to bring messages to our members, and in order to carry messages from our members to our leadership. And I've never seen a Republican Party official do something even remotely like that. And that, to me, is one of the biggest differences in how our party shapes its activities, especially Democrats Abroad.
I always say the politicians come and go, but the platform stands. As you mentioned, 4 years.
4 years.
You look historically at our platforms, and I feel that they're beautiful documents, and I'm very proud to say, hey, this is what we stand for. The politicians, yeah, here and there, but the platform stands.
Very much so. And you know, the 2020 platform builds off of a series of successes for Democrats abroad. The 2016 platform is really fantastic. It's got a huge amount of issues in there. And so our task was to refine that and include the voices of everybody into something that can really be a standard for us to bear.
Thank you, Aaron.
My pleasure.
Yes, this has been very enlightening, and thank you for coming on. Our next segment is going to be a discussion with people from the Asia Pacific region. I don't know if you want to stay on for that since you're from that area.
I'm sticking around.
Okay, great. Thanks so much. So people are jumping in for a second. There's a question in the Q&A box. This is from Susan, and she's the chair of Marseille, France. Where is the platform available to us on the website or wiki?
It is not yet available. Because right now what we're doing is we're going through a final round of edits with a professional copy editor to ensure that, you know, stuff like it's U period, S period throughout the document. So our goal is by the end of this week, by Sunday, to have a public document and to share it with everybody. So pay attention to your email inbox, and you will see all of the instructions and all the things there. But we're getting ready to release the first public draft. I'm just here to share what we've done to prepare that first public draft. And there's a number of people on this call, Angela, yourself, Kent, Alexander, who have been part of drafting this document. And so, you know, they're very welcome to chime in on where we're at with this stuff. But, you know, it's not just the 4 people whose pictures I showed sitting in a room and writing this. It's more than 50 people at this point who have contributed at some point.
Yeah, it's definitely a group effort, and I think it's maximizing our the performance of the document. You know, that we're really going to have a really progressive document, and that's something that we need to emphasize to people who are reluctant to vote for Biden. I think that it's very important that Biden is just one man, and to be honest, we've given too much importance to the president. The president works for us. He does what we want. We elected him. He's not the way Trump is, I'm the decider, or as he said in such a tacky way, I'm the shot caller. Like, oh my God. I never watched The Sopranos, but I think my husband has, and that sounds like something that would have come from there. We have to realize that we're voting. Oh yes, we need to ditch Moscow Mitch too, 100%. There's so many reasons to vote, and the climate is one of the many reasons. And in order to save ourselves and to make a better world, we have to make this platform as progressive as possible and try to get it spread around the United States to the other states so that we can move forward. So we have a few new guests right now. Hold on, we have some people in the queue. The decider, that's terrible too. I think, what's his name? George Bush. George Bush seems like a benign pest compared to Donald Trump. So we can't let this happen again. You know, Joe Biden's not the greatest man in the world. Okay.
I just wanted to chime in with, you know, where we're at with the platform and Democrats abroad generally. We passed a resolution last year at our global meeting to support a Green New Deal. And that's woven its way through the platform, through where we're at with the economy and supporting green jobs, through obviously in the environment plank as well. And I just want to point out that our movement as Democrats abroad on this issue isn't driven by who is the president. It's driven by our members, and it's driven by constituents. It's driven by the needs that our members see on the ground in the countries where they live. And so my opinion on this is that the platform is really our ability to tell people where we stand, and they have to listen, and making them listen is our job. So I hope that we can really pay attention to the way that Democrats Abroad is moving on these issues.
Yes, 100%. Just 1 second. I want to share something that someone on the call sent. I had them sent, they had a graphic they wanted to share. It's a picture of Earth that they were given, and this is Earth Day, so it's a nice picture. I'm sorry, I can't remember your name, and your email address doesn't have any like identification on it. So thanks for sharing, and happy Earth Day to everyone who's watching, for sure. So we're going to move to our next segment. Just for people who are just now tuning in, I'm Angela Fobbs. I'm the chair of the Global Black Caucus, and my partner in everything is Ann Hesse, the chair of the Global Women's Caucus.
Welcome, everybody.
Yes, and we have here many people from, you know what, I'm so happy everyone from Asia Pacific is here. I haven't had so many RSVPs from Asia Pacific region ever. So I'm super happy everybody could be here. We have Kent Getzinger. He is the chair of Australia. I don't have your bio, sorry. And of course, Aaron Kruse, he is from China, and Lane, and I don't want to screw up your last name, so go ahead and tell me your last name, Lane. You can unmute yourself.
Rhymes with Austin.
Mostyn.
Mostyn,
Yeah.
okay. All right, I don't want to screw up anybody's names. And she's also from Australia. She's the vice chair of Australia DA. And Alexander Lee, you're from China too, eh? Hold on, let me find my bios. Yes, you are the legal counsel for DA China. And you have a very long and vast environmental resume. So thanks you guys for coming on today. Tell us what's going on in Asia Pacific.
I'll take the plunge. Yeah, look, I'll take the plunge unless Aaron, just finished talking about the platform. Sorry, but wait, I'm chiming in there. Hi, everybody. My name is Kent Getzinger. I'm the chair of Australia, and thank you so much, Angela and Ann, for this amazing chat, for this marathon for Earth Day. Look, I mean, like certainly the one big thing that I think that maybe we could go back and forth with Wayne as well. Like the big thing that we really want to focus on is like Aaron said, our passing of the Green New Deal last year. I think at a special resolutions committee, we're focusing on this. And I think that is really, seeing all the surveys around Democrats abroad. Also, we've done a few surveys of Democrats abroad Australia, sort of leading up to the global presidential primary, and the environment is number one. And, with the Green New Deal, I'm trying to do some more actions around that, or trying to really make that a focus, and of course, we always want to be promoting it. We always want to be, partaking in actions which push for that. And I was actually going to mention something that happened earlier this year, and just to put that out there, sort of introduce, but I'll pass it on. That was really interesting, and like maybe to chat a bit more about later, is the economic theory behind this. It's just really interesting. I think our big passion, I guess, I'll let speak in a moment. It's really just this Green New Deal. I don't know if it's been explained yet or not. I mean, is obviously the environmental goals we know we need such a strong platform, but also, the just transition, treating everyone with respect and making sure that no one is left out of this, whatever work that we're doing. I mean, we're all working within this imperfect system of, using fossil fuels or using wasteful resources, and basically that we, obviously this whole transition, half that sort of platform is really moving towards those really, workers' rights, I think, and that's across the board as well, but also really valuing and really underscoring how that, people have been, obviously with the sexist division of labor, how so many jobs have been put on and devalued and, largely gendered and largely held, and that is, written to the policy a fair bit as well. So I just wanted to emphasize that. So we're certainly trying to, make that a big, push within our own country. And it can be challenging. Like we're definitely looking for other ways to try to do that within, Australia, but the larger sort of progressive caucus as well. I'm involved with the primarily progressive caucus members of all the others, and really want to be, getting some more interest around this. And usually that takes the sort of obvious placement of like attending climate marches and all those sorts of things, but really trying to raise awareness, I think, around this issue, just even amongst sort of the conversations that we have. And I guess one thing I'll speak to again in a minute, and I think we can come back a bit later. It's just like that, I think that everyone agrees that we need this. I think most of us hopefully agree that we need these vast environmental changes. But how are we, this idea of, quote, how are you going to pay for it, which is often thrown at us like this, this sort of, it's this just knee-jerk reaction. And actually, I think that it's really, Angela, I've loved how this marathon is being framed, because in this current crisis, like, we're realizing so many things don't, things we're being told were impossible are now possible. Like, we can, that there's all these stimulus packages and so forth coming out. Like, we've been told we can't work from home. We're working from home, and we're no stranger to online meetings and VA. But there's this really sort of shift in paradigm that I think that I've been working with a group with, that we're inviting to talk with Australia is one of the actions that we're doing. It talks about this thing called modern monetary theory, and that the fact is that that the government budget being an issue of its own currency. I'm not an expert in economics, but if a government or sovereign state entity being an issuer of fiat currency, not based on a gold standard, that is, can basically just has to manage inflation, but actually can support these ideas and so forth, and support some big changes that we know we need to make. And it is, and there are contests to it, of course, but it's having some of these conversations, and there's groups we're working with in the panels we're on in a couple of weeks. It's going to talk a bit more about that idea that we're featuring, but really just trying to have a bit more about that within the country, within members, and then trying to have those conversations everywhere. Certainly, that I think we could look to doing maybe something like we're going to do a letter to the editors campaign next week, but it also maybe we could lobby our own senators and Congress people about this too. But I'll pass the torch at that stage. But there's just some sort of initial thoughts of stuff we're working on.
I really agree with you that a lot of the myths about what we can do and what we can't do, actually, for me, or what was possible, was shattered when Trump was elected. It just showed me that literally anything could happen. I know people always say, oh, anything is possible, but in the past, it wasn't actually so much that anything was possible. But this Trump being elected just opened up a whole big window. I think we have to seize the opportunity. If anyone's ever read, what is it called? Naomi Klein's book. Come on, everybody tell me the name. You know the name. Yes, somebody on fire. No, the other one. The other book. The one about the
disaster
capitalism. Yeah. That everything is possible in an emergency situation, and we are in an emergency.
And it's prophetic. It's absolutely prophetic what's happening now. What's happened since the day she wrote that book.
Yeah, I mean, she really laid it out, like, and so we could actually take advantage of that. The shock doctrine. That's it. Thank you very much, Adrienne. Lane, do you have some comments you would like to make?
Oh yeah, just to tack onto that, just asking what's been going on in Asia Pacific, and I'd love to hear what other folks are up to. But when I joined Democrats Abroad in Sydney a few years ago, Trump had just been elected, and so we had Women's March, which exploded here in Australia. I think we were expecting in Sydney 1,000 people. We got 10,000. So yeah, it was absolutely awesome. And of course, climate change is a feminist issue, right? It's a women's issue. So that was very exciting, and that's how I connected with a lot of Democrats abroad, and how I kind of found out about the organization. And then shortly thereafter, we did the March for Science, which had a very much a, science-based policy, climate policy, a bend to it, and Democrats abroad absolutely had presence there. And that was really exciting. So I'm connected with Ume, who is now back in the States, and Quito, who's the former secretary of Democrats Abroad Australia. And so that was a great initiation to this whole thing. So it's all happened so very fast. In my tenure with Democrats Abroad Australia, we had done another march. It was the climate strikes. So we've been participating in the student climate strikes and waving our banners there, and that's been really great. So we had some good national turnout for that in the various cities that we're in, and then after that we had a pandemic. And so, as Kent rightly points out, we've been trying to keep the momentum going with those at-home actions. And so next week we're going to be doing a letter writing campaign, and we've got a former organizer of Indivisible from California who's going to be leading us in that and sharing some of her real world experiences. So that's something that we hope to bring to people, just to not lose sight of that, because that still is important, even though, yes, emissions are reducing around the world, and people think, well, maybe we don't have to worry about it so much, but remember that these changes occur over decades, right? We didn't get here in the past couple of years, we got here over many, many decades, and it's going to take a lot of time and drastic action to turn us around. So this is not the time to forget about this or let our efforts fade. We need to keep on pursuing this agenda, and especially considering that a lot of countries, as you rightly point out, a lot of leaders around the world, so-called leaders, are using this as an excuse to slash funding for environmental programs, to relax regulations, to allow big polluters to come back and do things that they wouldn't normally be doing if there was the scrutiny that would normally be on them. So I think it's as important now as it's ever been.
Yes, I completely agree. We've got a couple of comments from the chat box. Let me just comments, questions. There's a comment from, what was this guy's name? His name is Rich Hughes. Anything can happen. What about Democrats nominating a progressive candidate for president? Well, once again, anything can happen, and it did. That we didn't get a progressive nominee. But the interesting thing about Joe Biden, for me, is that in his time, and I don't want to say it like he's like on his last legs or something. In his time when he was younger, he was considered progressive. And as Lane says, yeah, Joe Biden did decide to embrace some version of the Green New Deal. The question is, how will we convince him to go all the way or further? Yes, and another, okay, Rich is a very prolific commenter. If you could please put your questions in the Q&A box, that would be really great. It would help me sort out the questions from the comments. There's a Q&A box down. Thank you very much. I'll just hang on and wait for your questions in the Q&A, so it's a little bit easier for me. Next, we have Alexander Lee. He's been on with us for a while. Let me just give you a quick intro, because you have a great bio. Alexander Lee is a general counsel for DA China. He taught an environmental justice course at Middlebury College in 1996, a year after he started Project Laundry List, which he mentioned in an earlier segment, an internationally renowned nonprofit that was featured in a full-length documentary, Drying for Freedom, in 2009. He was a special assistant to commissioners at the New Hampshire Public Utilities Commissioner immediately after graduating from Vermont Law School's top environmental law program. He was one of the participants in Green Corps in the inaugural environmental organizing semester, and has worked for the UFCW on its Wake Up Walmart campaign, as well as on Superfund reauthorization for the now defunct Natural Environmental Trust. He has worked on and run presidential campaigns in New Hampshire and run for office twice, serving as both chair, Concord City Democrats and the Merrimack County Democratic Committee. He was the head of the board for Granny D's campaign finance organization and has served on the board of Peace and Justice Center in Burlington, Vermont. He lives now in Guangzhou. I'm probably saying that wrong, where he teaches AP Environmental Science as well as Latin, history, and English literature. He is a tea fanatic and an American Revolution buff who grew up in Brookline, Massachusetts, the birthplace of JFK, Mike Dukakis, and Conan O'Brien. Oh, I love that. I'm sorry. You wrote it, dude. So I'm going to read it.
I had no idea what you wanted for a bio, but that was way too long. I probably could have just gotten away with just saying general counsel for Democrats abroad. But Mike Dukakis still takes the subway to work at Boston University, or at least he was a few years ago. Pretty amazing. Doesn't wear a helmet. But those of you who've been involved long enough in politics know what I mean. I met him when I was 5. He came up to me and asked me if I knew who he was, and I didn't from his face. But I watched the news with my dad, and he said his name, and I was like, "Oh, my dad's voting for the other guy," because I come from an old Boston Republican family. Anyway, I don't have much to add to the conversation today. I basically do what Aaron tells me to do. And most of the time he'll probably jump in and contradict that. I'm also worried about the top of the ticket, but I agree wholeheartedly that the way that we're going to make environmental change is to work on a Green New Deal, and the re-election of people like AOC and others around the country who get it at an environmental justice and environmental level is essential, and getting rid of Moscow Mitch, as somebody mentioned earlier, and I put up on the screen, is critical if we're going to make changes. So while I'm very discouraged about the top of the ticket, I think there's a lot of opportunity lower on the ticket to change the conversation in this country over the next few years. And I think that COVID-19 is pushing places like Brussels and Milan to basically try and get rid of cars. And so we've got a lot of opportunity to come out of this and maybe see some really big systemic change. We'll see how long those kind of small moves in the right direction by some major cities carry on.
Great. You guys, I would like, okay, there's a question here. Let me just read this question. And it's specifically for Asia Pacific region. When domestic waste also contributes to climate change, isn't a door-to-door campaign more effective than a public march or letter writing? Because domestic waste is a serious environmental issue in Asia Pacific developing countries. Does anybody have a comment or something to suggest about that?
So, just to clarify, a domestic campaign in our countries in which we live, or a domestic campaign back in the U.S.?
In the countries where you live.
Okay. Yeah. I'll throw out there that I think that, we love to do, well, I mean, before this current situation we have, we love to do in-person meetings, or, I'd love to do our country committee is Australia's basically the contiguous size of the United States. So, where we have concentrations of people, we'd love to go door to door, certainly. Face-to-face is, of course, the best way. I mean, I think that's by research, isn't it? The best way to get out the vote campaigns. I think that's the question. We'd love to do it in our home country. It makes the challenges with our membership being spread out, located in certain spots, makes it challenging to that. But happy to throw it open to anybody else wants to comment on that one.
Kent, can you tell us approximately how many time zones your region is? You're the most spread out of all of our regional groups. It's a huge challenge, isn't it?
Yeah, we technically have 3, we have 3, but then there's 4 in daylight time as well. So then there's one a state that doesn't like the daylight savings time. So yes, on the eastern coast of Australia, I forget what the GMT is right now. I think it's -9. But basically, what time are we right now? It's basically it's almost 6:30 on the eastern seaboard, and I'm in a time zone that's actually half an hour behind that, and then the Western Australia is an hour behind that as well. So yes, it is. I mean, the contiguous Australia is about the size of the U.S., roughly speaking. Yeah.
Does
So
that make your organizing a big challenge then?
Yeah, it does and it doesn't. In some ways, Australia is really, I mean, for population size, just in general, it is really centered around the capital cities of the 6 states and 2 territories. So that does make most members are focused on in those areas. However, on the eastern seaboard, up the coast, there are some smaller towns. Elaine, I don't know if you want to speak to Queensland at all, but certainly outside Sydney, north and south of Sydney, along the Victorian border where Melbourne is, there's also some concentrations of people as well. But yeah, that does make it a challenge to do, a basically face-to-face campaign. I really agree with the, with reducing waste wherever possible. Absolutely. But.
I did want to speak to the question, if I may, about domestic waste. I think there are a couple of things that we could say to that. One of them is that Democrats abroad, by our mandate, is not really supposed to talk about domestic foreign governments. So it's something that we try to adhere to. But I will point out that the climate marches are obviously people here, and I think that it's important that we support those types of marches that are global. So Science March, again, global. Women's March, again, global. I do personally participate in direct action here with Extinction Rebellion and other groups. So I very much do believe in that, but that's not something that that I do in my sort of official capacity. Also, I should point out, I was just looking up the facts on this. So if you do Google, for instance, plastic waste in Southeast Asia, and I did live a couple of years in Thailand, so can completely appreciate the plastic problem there. Did lots of diving and had seen some of that plastic trash personally in the beautiful water out there. And if you just Google it, the West has been dumping tens of millions of tons of trash in Southeast Asian countries for more than 25 years. So that's kind of the root cause of why China has stopped taking recycling waste, and that's so it's not that we process it in Germany and in the US and in Australia, it's that we send it away and let somebody else take care of it. And so that's where a lot of that waste comes from. So I think that's just really what I wanted to point out there.
How does the dumping of waste affect that garbage patch that's in the Pacific? Is that somehow related? This giant, I can't think of the name of what they call it. Yes, that's right. I can't think of the name of anything, but that's okay. But you know what I mean. There's several garbage patches throughout the systems of the oceans. And there's a big one in the Pacific. Is that caused just from people dumping garbage or from the accumulation of garbage, like from beaches and things like this? Anybody have please unmute yourself.
Alex? Sounds like a question for
Hey,
Alex.
Sorry, it's a soup, the way that they describe it. It's small plastic particles that have broken apart. Of course, what you see are the sort of sexy pictures of really disgusting stuff floating. But that's not what the majority of that is. So it's a soup of small particles, beads of plastic, and it fluctuates. And there's some debate about how large it gets. Sometimes people don't call it the patch; they call it the gyre. That's just because of the way that the oceans move. So maybe that's what you're thinking of. But basically, yes. It's somewhere between the size of Texas and the size of the continental United States. Just that one patch.
That is horrifying.
And so there have been, there was a very young boy, I'm forgetting whether he was 16 or 17, who got a lot of attention. There's been some good effort to invent some ways to clean up that patch, and there've been some major investments. And so I think we're, moving in that direction, but we can't keep up with the amount of waste that we're putting into the environment. And there have been a lot of stories over just the last week, really, about masks and gloves adding to the problem, because everybody worldwide is wearing disposable stuff that is ending up in the environment. So,
Wow.
yeah,
Okay.
something to think about.
Yeah, it is something to think about. Aaron, you wanted to make a comment?
Yeah, so more than half of the waste that's in that patch comes from people throwing stuff out in North America or Asia. And the number one source of plastic waste coming out of Asia is a river in China. So a lot of people think that it's people living in Shanghai throwing all their stuff in the water, but it's actually a lot more upstream from there, which is where a lot of manufacturing is done. So this isn't just people sitting at home in China throwing plastic on the ground, although that happens too. But in large part, this is a systemic issue that has to do with the way that we produce and consume things in the world. A lot of the waste that's in the Pacific Patch also comes from shipping containers, or people that are when you buy stuff and it's made in China and then it ships elsewhere in the world. Some of those ships lose materials, or they lose things, or they just throw their garbage overboard, and it's coming from that. So a big source of this isn't just a couple countries in Southeast Asia. It is consumption around the world. So just being mindful of what drives the growth of plastics in our ocean and the decline of the ecosystem generally is it's not just a one problem where we should just ban having people throw plastic bags in the water. It's a way that our world works that we need to think about.
Yes, for sure. And with that, at this time, our next main guest is going to be Naomi Aegis. It'll be 30 minutes before she's here, but she's going to talk about the Green New Deal and a just recovery. And in that vein, I'd like to play the video that AOC made with Naomi Klein about a message from the future about the Green New Deal. And then we can have a short discussion about that, if that's okay with everybody. I think it's like 7 minutes. So just give me a second, and actually let me do this. Let me turn off my camera and mute